A cat was meowing desperately at the living room window. The irritated young man yelled, "Get out of here, you useless animal!" But the feline wouldn't give up, blocking his path. By the time he finally understood why, it was too late to turn back. Before we start today's story, let me know where you're watching from. Go ahead and grab a coffee or get comfy on the couch. And please don't forget to support us. All you have to do is hit the like button, and I'll know you enjoy this kind of story. So, you ready? Let's begin. The house at the end of Primrose Lane seemed forgotten by time. Its faded walls and overgrown yard told the story of someone who had given up on keeping up appearances. At 78 years old, Helen lived there alone, with only a small social security check and memories of better times for company. It was a Thursday afternoon when she first noticed those yellow eyes watching her through the fence. A tabby cat, thin and wary, who seemed just as lonely as she was. "Here, kitty," she murmured, holding out a piece of toast left over from breakfast. The feline hesitated, but hunger won out. From that day on, a silent routine was established between the two souls life had left behind. Every morning, she would leave a bowl of food on the porch, and he would appear on schedule, always alert, always grateful. "You need a name," she said one day, watching him stretch in the sun after eating. "What about Buddy?" "Yes, that's what you are, my only buddy." The weeks went by, and Buddy grew bolder. First, he ventured to the kitchen door. Then, he dared to come inside on colder afternoons. Helen didn't mind. In fact, for the first time in years, she felt less alone. "You know, Buddy," she'd say while knitting in her old armchair with the cat curled at her feet, "it's been a long time since I've had such a good conversation." His soft purr was all the answer she needed. But Buddy wasn't just a companion. There was something special in those golden eyes, an intelligence that seemed to understand more than any animal should. When Helen forgot to take her pills, he would meow insistently near the kitchen cabinet where she kept them. When she fell asleep in the armchair, he would stay awake watching over her. One night, Helen received a call that left her surprised and worried. On the other end of the line, a familiar but distant voice tried to sound affectionate. "Hi, Grandma. It's Kevin, your grandson. Remember me?" How could she forget? Kevin, the son of her late daughter, had vanished from her life 3 years ago. The last she'd heard, it was troubling news, trouble with drugs, debt, and a bad crowd. "Of course I remember, my dear. How are you?" "Oh, Grandma, I'm doing much better now. You know, I've been thinking about you a lot. I think I should come visit. How about tomorrow night? We can talk, catch up." His voice sounded strange, nervous, but Helen felt her heart warm. Maybe her grandson had changed. Maybe he truly wanted to reconnect with his family. "That would be wonderful, Kevin. I'll bake that chocolate cake you used to love as a kid." "You don't have to go to any trouble, Grandma. I just want to see you." When she hung up the phone, Helen was beaming. Buddy, however, had been watching the entire conversation from the living room doorway, and something in his demeanor changed. His ears perked up, as if he had picked up on something she hadn't. "My grandson is coming to visit tomorrow, Buddy. You're going to like him," she said, stroking the cat. But Buddy pulled away, restless, and walked toward the front window, where he stood watching the street with a tension she had never seen before. Helen spent the rest of the evening planning the visit, tidying the house, and thinking about what she would cook. She didn't notice how Buddy remained vigilant, as if he knew something was about to happen. The cat seemed to sense the danger approaching on Primrose Lane, a danger the kind old woman couldn't imagine coming from her own family. Night fell slowly, and as Helen drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of a family reunion, Buddy positioned himself strategically near the front door. His instincts were screaming that this visit was not what it seemed, and he was determined to protect the only person who had ever shown him true kindness. The next morning arrived with a strange energy in the house on Primrose Lane. Helen woke up earlier than usual, eager to prepare everything for her grandson's arrival. Buddy, who normally slept at the foot of her bed, had spent the entire night pacing restlessly through the house. "What's wrong, Kitty? You're so agitated today," she noted, putting fresh kibble in his bowl. But Buddy barely touched the food, preferring to stay positioned by the living room window, watching every movement on the street. Helen spent the entire day preparing. She cleaned the house, which was already spotless, rearranged the sofa cushions for the third time, and started baking the promised chocolate cake. With each completed task, she glanced at the clock, counting down the hours to their reunion. "It's been so long since I've had company, Buddy. You have no idea how happy I am," she commented while mixing the cake batter. The cat remained silent, just watching her with those golden eyes that seemed to hold a secret. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Kevin paced nervously in the messy room he was staying in. His eyes were sunken, his hands trembled slightly, and the expression on his face was that of someone who had made a desperate decision. "Just get in, get the money, and get out," he muttered to himself, ignoring the small voice of conscience trying to remind him of who Helen really was. "She won't even miss it. She's just an old lady. And I need this more than she does." Drugs had consumed not only his money but also his ability to see the consequences of his actions. The loan sharks weren't messing around, and he had only until Sunday to pay off his debt. His grandmother's house was his only hope. He knew she kept her savings somewhere in there. Back at the house on Primrose Lane, the afternoon dragged on slowly. Helen had finished all her preparations and was now sitting in her favorite armchair, knitting and talking to Buddy. "You know, when my daughter was alive, Kevin used to spend his summers here. He was such a sweet boy. I'm sure he still is deep down," she said, her eyes shining with nostalgia. "Sometimes people just need a second chance, don't they?" Buddy meowed softly, a sound that carried something that seemed like sadness or a warning. He had positioned himself strategically in the living room, from where he could watch both the front door and the window overlooking the backyard. As the sun began to set, Buddy's agitation increased. He paced from room to room, sniffing the air as if he could detect something Helen couldn't perceive, and made small sounds of alert that she interpreted as excitement for the visit. "Calm down, Buddy. You're like Kevin. He always liked animals when he was little." She tried to reassure him, but the cat remained restless. At 7 in the evening, Helen called Kevin to confirm the time. "Hi, Grandma. Yeah, I'm still coming. I'm just taking care of a few things here. It should be around 9, okay?" "Of course, dear. I'll be waiting. The cake turned out delicious." "That's great, Grandma. See you soon." Kevin hung up the phone with sweaty hands. 2 more hours, enough time to build up his courage and plan his approach. He knew his grandmother kept cash at home. She had always been wary of banks, and he knew the hiding spots from his childhood. Back at the house, Helen turned on the porch lights and set the table for 2. The chocolate cake looked beautiful in the center of the table, and she had brewed fresh coffee. Everything was perfect to welcome her beloved grandson. Buddy, however, did not share her enthusiasm. He positioned himself near the front door and didn't move from there, like a soldier on guard duty. His feline instincts were picking up on something that Helen's innocence and love could not detect. The night was approaching, and with it, an ordeal that would test the limits of loyalty and protection. 9 o'clock at night. Helen was sitting in her living room armchair, wearing her best navy blue dress, the same one she wore for special occasions, and eagerly awaiting the ring of the doorbell. The table remained set, the cake untouched, and the aroma of fresh coffee hung in the air. Buddy hadn't moved from his strategic position. He was lying near the door, but completely alert, with his ears pricked up and his eyes fixed on the entrance. Every so often, he would get up, sniff under the door, and reposition himself. "He should be here any minute," Helen murmured, smoothing her dress for the 10th time. She had even put on a touch of pink lipstick, something she hadn't done in months. "You'll see, buddy, Kevin is such a good boy." Outside, Kevin parked the borrowed car 2 houses down from his grandmother's. He didn't want anyone to write down the license plate or remember details that could incriminate him later. He walked slowly down the sidewalk, glancing at the windows of the neighboring houses. They all seemed occupied with their own routines, a family having dinner here, a television on there. Perfect. No one would pay attention to a grandson visiting his grandmother. When he reached the gate of Helen's house, Kevin hesitated for a moment. The yellow porch light illuminated the front door, and through the curtain of the living room window, he could see the silhouette of his grandmother in her armchair. For a second, childhood memories flooded his mind. The summers he spent there, the cakes she baked, the stories she told before bed. But the desperate need for money quickly suffocated any feeling of remorse. Kevin opened the gate and walked toward the door. Inside the house, Buddy shot to his feet instantly. His fur bristled slightly, and a low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his throat. Helen, lost in her thoughts, didn't notice the change in the cat's behavior. The doorbell rang. "Oh, what a joy, he's here!" Helen exclaimed, rising quickly from her armchair. Buddy followed her, positioning himself strategically between her and the door. "What's wrong, Buddy? Move aside," she said affectionately, trying to step around the cat to open the door. But he didn't budge, staring intently at the entrance. Kevin rang the doorbell again, forcing a cheerful tone. "Hi, Grandma. It's me, Kevin." "I'm coming, dear." Helen gently pushed Buddy aside and opened the door with a radiant smile. "Kevin, my dear grandson." She wrapped him in a tight hug, and for a moment, Kevin almost gave in to the guilt growing in his chest. His grandmother was so happy, so genuinely thrilled to see him. She seemed more fragile than he remembered, smaller. "Hi, Grandma. You look great," he said, trying to sound natural. "Now that you're here, I'm wonderful. Come in, come in. I made your favorite cake." Kevin stepped inside and immediately felt a weight in his chest. Everything was exactly as he remembered. The same furniture, the same scent of lavender, the same photographs on the walls, showing happy moments of a family that was once whole. Buddy followed him closely, never taking his eyes off him. The cat had adopted a tense posture, as if ready to pounce at any moment. Kevin noticed this vigilance and felt a chill. "That's a nice cat, Grandma. Is he new?" "That's my friend Buddy," Helen said with pride. "He showed up here a few months ago, and we've been inseparable ever since. He's very protective of me." Kevin forced a smile, but couldn't ignore the way the animal was watching him. It was as if it knew exactly what his intentions were. "Come, sit here on the couch. I'll get the coffee," Helen said, gesturing to the living room sofa. Kevin sat down, but Buddy immediately leaped onto the arm of the nearest armchair, maintaining an elevated position from where he could observe the visitor's every move. "Is he always this watchful?" Kevin asked, trying to hide his discomfort. "Oh, don't worry about him. Buddy is just being cautious because you're new here. You two will get along just fine," Helen replied from the kitchen, preparing the tray with coffee. Kevin used these moments alone to scan the room. His eyes roamed every corner, looking for clues as to where his grandmother might keep her savings. The old dresser in the corner caught his attention. It had always been where she kept important documents. Buddy noticed the direction of his gaze and let out a low meow, almost like a warning. "What's wrong, Kitty? Don't you like visitors?" Kevin murmured, trying to sound friendly. But the cat just stared at him with those golden eyes that seemed to see right through his soul. Helen returned with the tray, all smiles. "Here we are. And look at this beautiful cake. Just like the ones I used to make when you were little." For the first few minutes, the conversation flowed naturally. Helen talked about life in the neighborhood, the neighbors, the small changes in her routine. Kevin tried to pay attention, but his mind was focused on how to bring up the subject that really mattered. "And you, dear, how are things? Work, personal life?" Helen asked, serving a generous slice of cake. "Ah, Grandma, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." Kevin swallowed hard. "I'm going through a tough time." Helen immediately leaned forward, her expression concerned. "What happened, my boy?" "It's just, I'm having some financial problems. You know how it is, the job market is tough, and I kind of got myself into some debt." Buddy, who had relaxed slightly during the small talk, tensed up again. Something in the shift of Kevin's tone had alerted him. "Oh dear, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Helen took her grandson's hand, genuinely worried. "How much do you need?" The ease with which she offered help made Kevin feel an even sharper pang of guilt. She didn't question, didn't hesitate, she simply wanted to help. It's a lot, Grandma. About $5,000. Helen was silent for a moment, calculating. 5,000. That's a lot of money, Kevin. My Social Security isn't much, but let me see what I can do. Do you have that money saved here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Well, I have some savings. I've never really trusted banks, you know. I've always preferred to keep it at home, in a safe place." Kevin's eyes lit up. It was exactly what he had hoped to hear. Buddy jumped down from the armchair and walked over to stand between Helen and Kevin, as if wanting to physically shield her from the conversation that was unfolding. "Buddy, what's gotten into you? Come back here," Helen called. But the cat stayed where he was, watching Kevin with an intensity that made him increasingly uncomfortable. "Grandma, if you could just lend me the money, I promise I'll pay you back. It's just to sort this out, and then my life will get back to normal." Helen studied him with affection, but there was something in her eyes that Kevin couldn't quite decipher. Was it suspicion, or just the natural concern of a grandmother? "Kevin, my dear, you know I'd do anything to help you. You're my family, my only grandson. So you'll lend it to me. Let's talk about this calmly. First, tell me exactly what happened. What kind of debt is this?" Kevin felt the trap closing in. He couldn't tell the truth about the drugs, about the loan sharks, about the life he had chosen. He needed to invent a convincing story, and fast. It's a complicated story, Grandma." Kevin looked away, fiddling nervously with his hands. "I went into business with a friend, a venture that seemed promising, you know, but it went south, and now the suppliers are demanding payment." Helen nodded, absorbing every word. Buddy, from his observation post, seemed increasingly agitated. He began to circle the coffee table, letting out low meows that sounded almost like warnings. "What kind of business was it?" Helen asked softly. "Oh, Grandma, it was online sales. Clothes, things like that. But the market is tough, and we lost a lot of money." The story sounded fabricated even to Kevin's own ears, but he pressed on. "The problem is, I co-signed for some of the purchases, and now I have to cover everything myself." Helen remained silent for a long moment, watching her grandson. There was something in the way he avoided her gaze, in the way his hands trembled slightly, that awakened a maternal intuition she had developed over decades of caring for people. "Kevin, are you okay? You seem different." "Different how?" "Thinner, pale, and your eyes." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When was the last time you got a full night's sleep?" Kevin felt a cold sweat run down his back. His grandmother had always been perceptive, but he hadn't expected her to notice the signs of his addiction. "Oh, Grandma, it's just the stress. These financial worries don't let anyone sleep well." Buddy suddenly stopped circling and positioned himself directly in front of Kevin, staring at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "This cat is making me nervous," Kevin said, trying to laugh it off. "It's like he's judging me." "Buddy has good instincts about people," Helen replied softly. He's never acted this way with anyone before. That observation made Kevin swallow hard. He needed to speed things up, get the money and leave before his grandmother started asking more questions. "Grandma, about the money, could you show me where you keep it? I really need to take care of this tonight." Helen hesitated. Something about his urgency, the way he kept pushing the subject, set off alarms in her head. "Kevin, why the rush? Can't we sort this out tomorrow during the day? It's almost 10 o'clock at night. It's just the guys I owe. They're not very patient, you know, and tomorrow might be too late." Buddy started meowing louder, as if trying to draw Helen's attention to something important. The cat approached her and began rubbing against her legs, something he did when he wanted to alert her to danger. "Easy, Buddy." Helen tried to calm him, but she couldn't ignore the cat's strange behavior. Kevin stood up abruptly from the sofa. "Grandma, please. I know it's a lot of money and I know it's late, but I really need this help. You always said I could count on you for anything." There was something in his voice now, a desperate urgency that made Helen feel uncomfortable for the first time since he'd arrived. "Kevin, you're scaring me a little. Why don't you tell me the truth about what's going on?" "I already told you the truth." The reply came out louder than he intended, and Kevin immediately realized his mistake. Helen recoiled slightly, and Buddy positioned himself directly between her and her grandson. "Sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean to yell. It's just, I'm really on edge." Helen studied him for a long moment. 45 years of experience dealing with people told her something was very wrong. The grandson, she remembered, would never have pressured her like this, would never have made her feel threatened in her own home. "I think it's best if you come back tomorrow, Kevin, when you're calmer, and I've had time to think this through." Kevin felt panic rise in his chest. He couldn't leave empty-handed, not when he was so close. "No, Grandma, please don't send me away." Kevin grew desperate, pacing the living room. "I need that money tonight. You don't understand how serious this is." Helen rose slowly from her armchair, with Buddy immediately at her side. The cat had adopted a protective stance, its body tense and fur slightly raised. "Kevin, you're frightening me. This isn't the grandson I know." "I am your grandson!" he exploded, completely losing control. "And you should be helping me without asking so many questions." Buddy immediately began to growl, a low, menacing sound that had never come from his throat before. Helen had never seen the cat so agitated. "Kevin, lower your voice. You are in my house," Helen said, trying to remain firm despite the fear that was beginning to grow. Kevin stopped pacing and faced her. For a moment, Helen saw something in his eyes that made her tremble, a coldness, a desperation she didn't recognize. "Sorry, Grandma. I'm really sorry." He tried the affectionate tone again, but now it sounded forced and unconvincing. "It's just that I'm truly desperate. These men, they could hurt me if I don't pay." "What men? Kevin, tell me the truth, please." Kevin hesitated. Part of him wanted to confess everything about the drugs, the addiction that had destroyed his life, the dealers who were threatening him. But he knew if he told the truth, Helen would never give him the money. They're loan sharks, Grandma. They lent me money for the business, and now they want it back with sky-high interest." Helen shook her head, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "My God, Kevin, how did you get into a situation like this?" I just wanted to be successful, Grandma. I wanted to have money to take care of you, to be someone in life." The lie came out easily, but as he said it, Kevin felt a stab of guilt. He hadn't worried about his grandmother's well-being in years, and now he was using it to manipulate her. "Kevin, even if I wanted to help you with that much, I don't have $5,000 saved here." Kevin studied her, trying to detect if she was lying. "Grandma, I know you've always kept money at home. Ever since I was a kid, I remember you saying that." I have some savings, yes, but not that much. How much do you have? The question came out more bluntly than Kevin intended, and Helen immediately noticed the change in tone. Why do you need to know exactly how much I have? Buddy positioned himself even closer to Helen, as if he could sense the conversation was taking a dangerous turn. Because I need to know if you can help me with at least part of it. Kevin tried to recover. Kevin, I think you should go home now. We'll talk tomorrow, when you're calmer. No! The word came out like a roar. I can't leave without that money! Helen took a step back, now clearly frightened. Buddy placed himself directly between her and Kevin, arching his back and baring his teeth in a show of protection he had never displayed before. Kevin, are you threatening me? No, I'm not threatening anyone. But even as he denied it, Kevin moved closer to her, and there was something in his movements that made Buddy growl louder and louder. Grandma, please. You're the only person in the world who can help me. If you don't give me this money, I don't know what will happen to me. Helen saw genuine tears in Kevin's eyes, and for a moment, her maternal heart wanted to give in. But Buddy remained tense by her side, and she trusted the cat's instincts more than her own emotions at that moment. Kevin, if you're really in danger, we should call the police. They can help you. No! You can't call the police! That will only make everything worse! Kevin's desperate reaction confirmed Helen's suspicions. There was much more to this story than he was letting on, and she was beginning to realize that she might not know the grandson standing in her living room anymore. Kevin, I think you should leave now, Helen said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing fear. Come back when you're ready to have an honest conversation with me. Kevin felt despair completely take over. He couldn't leave empty-handed. The dealers had made it clear that Sunday was the deadline, and it was already Friday. Grandma, please, just show me where the money is. I promise I'll pay you back. Kevin, just show me where it is. The shout made Helen jump, and Buddy immediately positioned himself in front of her, fur on end. The cat was clearly ready to attack if necessary. Kevin looked at the feline and felt an irrational anger build inside him. This animal was getting in the way of everything, standing between him and what he needed. Get this cat out of my way, he said, his voice dangerously low. I'm not moving Buddy anywhere. This is his home as much as it is mine. Kevin took a step toward Helen, and Buddy immediately rose up on his hind legs, showing his claws and hissing like a snake. I said, get this thing out of here. Kevin made a sudden move toward the cat, trying to kick it, but Buddy was faster. The feline leaped aside and repositioned himself again between Helen and her grandson. Kevin, how dare you try to hurt Buddy? Helen was genuinely shocked now. The grandson she knew would never harm an animal. This cat is getting on my nerves, just standing there looking at me like I'm some kind of criminal. And you're acting like one. The words slipped from Helen's lips before she could stop them. Kevin froze. His grandmother's words struck something deep inside him, but instead of awakening his conscience, they only fueled his anger. What was that? Now I'm a criminal. I'm your grandson. I came here asking for help, and you're taking the side of some stray cat. Buddy is not a stray. He has more honesty and loyalty than... Helen stopped mid-sentence, but Kevin finished for her. Than I do? Is that what you were going to say? The silence that followed was deafening. Helen looked at her grandson, really looked, and saw for the first time the extent of the transformation that had taken place. The sunken eyes, the trembling hands, the sickly pallor, the aggression. It all started to make sense. Kevin, she said softly, are you on drugs? The question hit Kevin like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he considered denying it. But Helen's gaze was so piercing that he knew lying was pointless. That doesn't matter, he muttered. Of course it matters. My God, Kevin, how did you get to this point? It doesn't matter how I got here. What matters is that I need this money to get out of this mess. Buddy began to meow loudly, as if trying to draw attention to something. The cat looked back and forth between Kevin and the direction of the kitchen, as if he knew exactly where Helen kept her savings. Kevin noticed the feline's behavior, and a terrible idea began to form in his mind. This cat. He knows where you keep the money, doesn't he? Helen didn't answer, but the look on her face said it all. He's here all the time, watching you, seeing where you go, what you do. Kevin started walking slowly toward the kitchen, and Buddy immediately blocked his path, growling low. "Get out of the way," Kevin said, with a coldness that made Helen tremble. "Kevin, no, please don't do this." But Kevin had already crossed a line from which there was no return. The desperate need for drugs had killed any shred of conscience he had left. Kevin tried to step around Buddy, but the cat was quicker. With an agile leap, the feline once again blocked his path, hissing and showing its claws. "Get out of the way!" Kevin screamed, completely losing control. He made a sudden move to push the cat, but Buddy was prepared. The feline leaped and sank its claws into Kevin's arm, scratching him deeply. "Ah, you damn animal!" Kevin clutched his bleeding arm and looked at Buddy with pure hatred. "Now you're going to get it!" Helen watched the scene in horror. "Kevin, stop, please!" But Kevin was beside himself. He grabbed a vase from a nearby table and hurled it at Buddy. The cat dodged just in time, and the vase shattered against the wall. "You're going to get out of my way!" Kevin bellowed. Buddy didn't back down. On the contrary, the cat took an even firmer stance between Kevin and the kitchen, its fur completely on end, emitting a continuous growl that echoed through the house. "Kevin, for God's sake, what kind of person have you become?" Helen cried, pressed against the living room wall. "I've become someone who needs to survive," he yelled back. "And I'm not going to let a damn cat stop me." Kevin looked around for something to defend himself with or to attack Buddy. His eyes landed on the cane Helen used for her walks. It was leaning against the wall near the door. "No, Kevin, don't do that," Helen whispered, realizing his intention. Kevin grabbed the cane and brandished it toward Buddy. "Now you're going to move, or I'm going to make you move." But Buddy showed no fear. The cat crouched, ready to spring, its golden eyes fixed on Kevin. It was a stunning sight, a small feline facing down a grown man to protect the one he loved. "Kevin," Helen's voice cut through the air like a blade. "If you hurt Buddy, you will no longer have a family. I will never want to see you again in my life." The words hit Kevin like a bucket of cold water. For a moment he hesitated, the cane trembling in his hands. "Grandma, You choose right now, Kevin. Either you stop this and we talk like a family, or you continue and lose the only person who still cares about you forever." Kevin looked at his grandmother, who was crying silently against the wall. Then he looked at Buddy, who remained in a defensive posture, ready to protect Helen to the death if necessary. For a brief moment, Kevin's humanity fought against his addiction. He saw himself through Helen's eyes, a desperate young man, threatening a helpless old woman and a cat that only wanted to protect her. But then the withdrawal hit hard, making his hands shake and his mind fill with images of the dealers, the threats of what would happen if he didn't get the money. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," he murmured, tears in his eyes. "But I don't have a choice." Kevin raised the cane, prepared to strike Buddy. The cat flinched, ready for the impact, but didn't retreat an inch. It was then that something extraordinary happened. Buddy didn't attack Kevin. Instead, the feline did something neither of them expected. He let out a long, drawn-out meow, not of fear or anger, but a sound that seemed filled with sadness and disappointment. It was as if the cat was saying, "I know who you really are. I saw the kindness that once existed in you, and I feel sorry for the man you've become." That meow touched something deep in Kevin's soul. For a moment, He saw the situation with total clarity. He was threatening to beat an animal that only wanted to protect his grandmother in a house where he had been welcomed with love and affection. The cane trembled in his hands. Kevin remained frozen for several long seconds, the cane suspended in the air while Buddy's meow echoed in his conscience. The cat stared at him with those golden eyes that seemed to see right into his soul, and Kevin felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Genuine shame. I can't, he muttered, slowly lowering the cane. Helen, who had closed her eyes expecting the worst, cautiously opened them. Kevin, I can't do this, Grandma. I can't hurt you. Tears began to stream down Kevin's face. But I can't leave without the money either. They're going to kill me, Grandma. Literally. Kevin collapsed onto the floor, sobbing like a child. I've ruined everything, my whole life. And now I'm here, threatening the only person who still loves me. Buddy slightly relaxed his defensive posture but remained alert, watching Kevin's every move. Helen cautiously approached her grandson, who was sitting on the floor. Kevin, tell me the truth, all of it, from the beginning. And then, like a dam breaking, Kevin started to talk. He told her about the first time he tried drugs in college, about how what seemed like just fun turned into a necessity. He talked about the jobs he lost, the friends he pushed away, the lies he told. It started with a $200 debt, he sobbed. Now it's $5,000. The interest never stops growing, and the guys... Grandma, they're not kidding. They've threatened me several times. Helen listened in silence, her heart breaking with each revelation. Buddy slowly approached and sat beside her, as if offering support. Why didn't you come to me sooner? She asked softly. Why did you let it get to this point? Because I was ashamed of what I've become, and because I knew you'd be disappointed in me. Kevin, I'm disappointed in your choices, but I would never stop loving you. You're my grandson. Kevin looked up at her through his tears. Even after everything I did tonight? After threatening you? Helen hesitated for a moment, looking at Buddy, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. The cat seemed to give a slight nod, as if saying there was still hope for Kevin. Even after all of this, she confirmed. But there have to be changes, Kevin. Real changes. I know, Grandma. I know I need help. I need to stop all of this, but first I have to settle this debt or they won't give me a chance to change anything. Helen was silent for a long moment, thinking. She thought of her savings, tucked away in an old cookie tin in the kitchen, $3,500 she had scraped together over years, cutting corners and saving on everything she could. I have $3,500, she said finally. It's everything I have in the world. Kevin lifted his head, surprised. Grandma, wah, but I'll only give you this money if you promise me 3 things. Anything, Grandma, anything. First, you will use this money only to pay off the debt. No drugs, I promise. Second, tomorrow you will get help. We'll go to a treatment center together. You will agree to check in if they think it's necessary. Kevin nodded vigorously. Yes, Grandma, I promise. And third, Helen looked at Buddy, who was now more relaxed but still watching Kevin closely. You will apologize to Buddy. He was just protecting me, doing what any family member would do. Kevin looked at the cat, who stared back with an expression that seemed to mix caution and compassion. Buddy, Kevin said, his voice choked with emotion. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. You're better than I deserve. Both of you are. To Kevin's surprise, Buddy stood up and slowly walked over to him, sniffing his outstretched hand before lightly rubbing his head against it. It was a gesture of forgiveness that Kevin would never forget. 3 months later, the house on Primrose Lane was more alive than ever. Kevin came to visit Helen every Friday, but now they were real visits. He arrived with flowers for his grandmother and special treats for Buddy. "How was your week at the center?" Helen asked, serving afternoon coffee. "Tough, but good," Kevin replied, petting Buddy, who now greeted him with welcoming purrs. "I've been clean for 85 days. The relationship between Kevin and Buddy had completely transformed. The cat, who once saw him as a threat, now treated him like part of the family. It was as if Buddy knew that the Kevin who had tried to hurt him that night wasn't the real Kevin. "And work?" Helen asked. "I started at an auto shop on Monday. It's just part-time for now, but the owner said if I work hard, he might hire me full-time." Kevin looked around the living room, now repaired and reorganized. He had fixed the damage from that terrible night himself, replacing the broken vase and repainting the wall where it had shattered. "Grandma, I never properly thanked you for what you did for me." "You don't have to thank me, dear. That's what family is for. Not just for the money, but for not giving up on me when I had already given up on myself." Buddy jumped onto Kevin's lap, something he did regularly during his visits. The cat had become a sort of emotional barometer. He always knew when Kevin was going through a rough patch and offered his comforting company. "You know what's funny?" Kevin said, scratching behind Buddy's ear. "At the rehab center, when I told the story of what happened here, no one believed that a cat had stopped me from making an even bigger mistake." "And what did you say?" "That they didn't know Buddy," Kevin smiled. "I explained that he's no ordinary cat. He's a guardian angel disguised as a feline." Helen laughed, a genuine laugh that hadn't been heard in that house for a long time. Buddy has always been special. From the very first day he showed up. "He saved me that night, Grandma. He saved me from becoming someone I couldn't live with being if he hadn't stopped me from taking that money by force. I don't know how it would have ended." Kevin paused, lost in thought. "In therapy, my psychologist explained that sometimes we need a mirror to see who we've really become. Buddy was my mirror. When I saw the fear in his eyes, when I heard that meow, it was like I was seeing reality for the first time in years." Buddy purred louder, as if he understood he was being praised. "And now?" Helen asked. "How do you feel about the future?" "Scared, but hopeful," Kevin admitted. "Every day is a struggle, but now I have reasons to fight. I have you two, I have a job, I have a chance to rebuild my life." Kevin stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Primrose Lane, which now lived up to its name. "Grandma, there's something I want to do." "What's that?" "I want to adopt a cat. At the center they have a program where we take care of abandoned animals. They think it will help with my treatment." Helen smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea. But first, I want Buddy's approval," Kevin said, turning back to the cat. "What do you think, Buddy? Are you up for helping me take care of another cat who needs a chance?" Buddy meowed once, a sound that seemed like approval. When Kevin was getting ready to leave, it was already dark. He hugged Helen for a long time and said a fond goodbye to Buddy. "See you next Friday," he said. "Kevin," Helen called as he was at the door. "I love you, my grandson, and I'm so proud of the man you're becoming." Kevin smiled, his eyes welling up. "I love you guys too. Thank you for not giving up on me." After Kevin left, Helen sat in her armchair with Buddy on her lap. "Thank you," she whispered to the cat. "Thank you for saving my family." Buddy purred softly and snuggled against her. Outside, Primrose Lane was quiet and peaceful, protected by love, second chances, and the proof that sometimes angels come in unexpected forms, even with 4 paws and golden eyes. So, what did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments if you believe animals can be our guardian angels. If you enjoyed it, Don't forget to like and share so more people can discover these stories of love and protection between humans and animals.